I used to believe love was enough to hold a family together. I clung to that idea like a child grips a worn-out teddy bear naively, desperately, until the seams burst and the stuffing spilled everywhere. And when it did, it wasn't just betrayal I faced. It was something darker. Something that almost ended me. My name is Sandra Harris. I'm 34 years old, and I live just outside Savannah, Georgia, in a 2-story brick house with white shutters and a dying magnolia tree out front. I used to be a 3rd-grade teacher. That was before Jamie was born, my son, my light, my anchor. When he came into this world, I made a choice. I stepped away from my classroom, my students, my identity as a working woman, and chose motherhood full-time. I thought it was noble. I thought it was right. But over time, that choice started to feel more like a trap than a gift. Postpartum depression isn't something people talk about much around here. You're expected to glow, to smile through the sleepless nights and sore nipples. But I didn't glow. I cracked. Slowly, silently. I began to withdraw from friends, from family, even from myself. Some days, I barely recognized the woman staring back at me in the mirror, hair unwashed, eyes vacant, shoulders slumped like a marionette with cut strings. And Caleb, well, Caleb didn't seem to notice. Or maybe he did, and that's why he stopped looking altogether. He worked in construction management, long hours, early mornings, late nights. At first, I admired his dedication. We needed the money. The house, the car, Jamie's diapers, they didn't pay for themselves. But then the late nights got later. He started showering twice a day, keeping his phone face down, bringing home the scent of cologne that wasn't his. I told myself I was imagining things. That maybe I'd grown paranoid in my loneliness. Maybe I was just insecure. After all, who would want me now? With my soft stomach, my tired eyes, my emotional mess of a mind. There was one night I remember clearly. I had made chicken pot pie his favorite. Jamie was already asleep, curled in his racecar bed with his stuffed fox. The house was quiet, save for the bubbling of gravy in the oven and the occasional creak of the wooden floorboards. Caleb was supposed to be home by 7. He arrived at 9:15. Didn't kiss me. Didn't ask how my day was. Just grunted, changed, and stared at his phone for the rest of the evening. I sat across from him at the table, watching him chew like I was trying to decipher a code. I wondered what went through his mind. Did he feel guilty? Excited? Indifferent? His eyes never met mine. Not once. Another time, I noticed lipstick on his collar. A faint smudge, too pink to be mine. I stood in the laundry room, holding the shirt like it might whisper the truth to me. My chest tightened, my throat went dry. But when I confronted him, he laughed. Probably from a client's wife, he said, waving it off. You know how those people hug everyone? I nodded, because arguing felt useless. Because deep down, I was afraid he'd confirm my worst fear. That he had, in fact, found someone else, someone vibrant, confident, untouched by the weight of motherhood. My days became routine. Not in the comforting way, but in the suffocating kind. Wake up, feed Jamie, clean, cook, scroll through Instagram and wonder how other women made it all look so easy. I'd stare at pictures of perfect families with matching pajamas and wonder if any of them were pretending to. At night, when the silence wrapped around the house like a thick wool blanket, I'd cry. Sometimes quietly. Sometimes into a pillow so Jamie wouldn't hear. And sometimes, I'd just sit by the window, waiting for Caleb's car to pull into the driveway, hoping maybe tonight he'd be different. Kinder. Present. But he never was. Eventually, I stopped reaching for him. The space in our bed widened, not just physically but emotionally. We were two ghosts haunting the same house. And I hated that I still loved him. That I still remembered the way he held my hand in college, the way he kissed my forehead after I gave birth. I clung to those fragments like lifeboats in a storm. And all the while, a question gnawed at me: was this my fault? Had I failed as a wife? As a woman? I began to keep a journal. Not to document the days there was nothing worth recording, but to pour out the noise in my head. I wrote letters I never sent. I drafted goodbyes I never intended to use. It was therapeutic, in a quiet, broken way. Then came the day I found the messages. But that part of the story comes later. All you need to know right now is this: I tried. I tried to be the kind of wife who forgave, who gave space, who waited. I tried to be soft when I wanted to scream, calm when I wanted to break. I told myself that love meant patience. But I didn't know that real love doesn't ask you to disappear. And mine almost did. I found the messages on a rainy Tuesday morning. Jamie was at preschool, and I was cleaning out the kitchen drawers, trying to declutter the mess that had quietly taken over our lives. Caleb had left his tablet unlocked on the counter. He never did that. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it was arrogance. Either way, curiosity or something darker pulled me in. What I saw gutted me. Dozens of messages between Caleb and a woman named Rena. Her name was familiar. She worked in his office, someone he had only ever mentioned once or twice. But the intimacy in their messages, casual, cruel, coded, made it clear this wasn't new. This had been going on for months. Maybe years. They called me names. Jokes about my cooking, my hair, my weight. They laughed about how pathetic I was. Caleb referred to me as the ghost. Rena called me his pet project. But one line cut through everything: she's so weak, she won't last much longer. I couldn't breathe. I took screenshots. Printed them. Folded the pages and tucked them inside a manila envelope. I placed it gently in the drawer beside our bed next to our wedding photo. Then I drove to the courthouse and filed for divorce. No screaming. No confrontations. Just a quiet, surgical cut. I thought that would be the end of it. 3 days later, I woke up in a hospital bed. My mouth was dry. My arms were hooked to IVs. A nurse hovered nearby, her smile cautious, practiced. "You're safe now," she said. "You had us scared." They said I overdosed on sleeping pills. They said I had written a suicide note, left it on my nightstand. Sent goodbye texts to my mother and my best friend. They said I tried to end my life. But I didn't remember any of it. Panic crawled under my skin. I asked to see the note. My handwriting, but something was off. The loops too clean. The phrasing too clinical. The texts, my phone was gone. Caleb had it, apparently. Said he was trying to protect me. He arrived at the hospital the next morning. Flowers in hand. Concern painted on his face like makeup. He played the grieving husband well. Told the doctors I'd been struggling with depression, that he'd begged me to get help. They nodded solemnly. Mental illness. Sad but predictable. When I insisted that I hadn't done this, that I hadn't tried to die, his face darkened. He told the nurse I was confused. That I had a history of emotional instability. That I had a journal full of suicidal thoughts. He wasn't lying about that part. But he twisted it, weaponized it, turned it into a verdict. The hospital placed me under observation. A week. Mandatory psych evaluation. My mother was allowed to visit, but even she looked unsure. You just need rest, she said, her voice trembling. You've been through so much. News of my attempt spread fast. Social media hummed with rumors. People from church sent messages, some kind, most hollow. Friends stopped calling. Playdates disappeared. I became the woman who tried to kill herself after her husband left. The tragedy everyone whispered about but never visited. Jamie was placed in temporary custody with Caleb. The court decided it was safer, more stable. I wasn't even allowed to say goodbye. At night, alone in the sterile hospital room, I began to question myself. Had I done it? Could I have? Could my mind have snapped so cleanly that I forgot everything? Was I losing it? I pressed my hands to my temples, trying to force the memories back. There was nothing. Just a blank space where the horror should have been. I read the note again and again. The words didn't feel like mine. They were hollow. Detached. Then one night, something snapped, not in fear, but in clarity. I didn't do this. I remembered what I ate for dinner that night. I remembered brushing Jamie's teeth. Tucking him in. The warm weight of his hug. I remembered sitting on the couch, tired but lucid. There was no gap. No spiral. No collapse. And if I remembered all of that, then who wrote the note? Who sent the texts? It wasn't me. A pulse of fury surged through me. It lit up the numb corners of my mind like fireworks. For the first time in weeks, I felt awake. Awake and hunted. He tried to erase me. He wanted the world to think I disappeared by my own hand. He wanted to keep Jamie, keep his image, keep his freedom. But he made one mistake. I was still alive. And I was going to make sure the world saw what he had done. Even if no one believed me yet. The day I left the hospital, I wasn't the same woman who had entered. Something inside me had hardened, sharpened. I knew what had been done to me. And now, I needed to prove it. My first step was to request the full medical records from the hospital. It wasn't easy. They hesitated, citing privacy and procedure, but I pushed. played the role of the concerned patient who simply wanted answers. When the documents finally came, I read every word like they were pieces of a bomb I was learning to dismantle. One line caught my eye: traces of clonazepam found in bloodstream. Clonazepam, a powerful sedative. I had never been prescribed it. It wasn't in our home. And yet, there it was, quietly tucked into the corner of the toxicology report like an overlooked thread. Someone had drugged me. I circled the phrase in red ink. I called my best friend, Maya. She had stood by me since college, long before marriage, before motherhood. I told her everything: the messages, the hospital, the missing memories. She listened in silence, then simply said, "What do you need me to do?" "Help me get into my iCloud," I said. "I think he used my account to send the texts. I need to see where they came from." Maya worked in IT. Within hours, she pulled the access logs. We traced the IP addresses. One of them pointed directly to Caleb's office. On a night when I was supposedly unconscious on our living room couch, someone had used his company computer to log into my account and send goodbye messages. The fury inside me began to take shape. Next, I visited my neighbor across the street, Mrs. Whitaker, a retired schoolteacher who spent most of her time tending to her garden and watching the neighborhood through her bay window. I asked, casually, if her security camera happened to catch anything the night before I was hospitalized. She raised an eyebrow, then disappeared into her den. 10 minutes later, she came back with a flash drive. I watched the footage in Maya's apartment. The timestamp was clear: 11:42 p.m. Caleb's truck pulled into the driveway. He didn't knock. He used his key. He left an hour and 20 minutes later, carrying what looked like a small box. I stopped the video and looked at Maya. "That box," I said. "It could be the pill bottle. Or my phone. Or both." We gathered everything: the hospital report with the unknown sedative, the IP logs showing unauthorized access, the security footage of Caleb entering the house. I scanned and organized it all. Facts. Dates. Screenshots. Nothing emotional. Just the truth. I took it to a lawyer. A woman named Deidre who specialized in family and criminal law. I sat in her office, clutching the manila folder to my chest like it might vanish. When I finished showing her the evidence, she looked at me for a long moment before saying, "We can build a case. But it won't be easy. Are you ready to fight?" "He tried to erase me," I said. "I'm not going to let him win." Within weeks, motions were filed. Hearings were scheduled. Caleb was served. The day of the custody hearing arrived like a storm. I stood in the courthouse hallway, my hands trembling despite the blazer and the carefully rehearsed statements. Maya squeezed my shoulder. My mother sat nearby, pale but present. And at the end of the hall, Jamie, my sweet boy, clutched a stuffed dinosaur, eyes wide with worry. In the courtroom, I presented the facts. Calm, clear, unwavering. My voice only cracked once, when I described waking up in the hospital without remembering how I got there. The judge reviewed the materials. The cross-examinations were brutal. Caleb denied everything. Claimed the footage was outdated. Said I was fabricating the IP evidence. But the data didn't lie. And neither did the toxicology report. When it was over, there was silence. The judge looked at me, then at Caleb. Then back at me. He granted me full custody of Jamie. Ordered an immediate investigation into Caleb for attempted murder and evidence tampering. Rena was named as a potential accomplice. I didn't cry. Not until later. Outside the courthouse, Jamie ran to me. Threw his arms around my waist. "Mommy," he said, "are we going home now?" "Yes, baby," I whispered. "We're going home." That night, I lay in bed beside him. Watched his chest rise and fall. For the first time in what felt like years, I felt safe. I had been hunted. Silenced. Painted as unstable. But now, the truth had a voice. And it was mine. I had fought for my son. For my name. For my life. And I had won. After the custody hearing, everything changed, but not in the way people imagine when they think of happy endings. There were no fireworks. No champagne toasts. Just me, Jamie, and a cardboard box of our belongings moving into my mother's spare bedroom. It was a quiet restart. A careful exhale. The storm had passed, but the wreckage was still there, both around and within me. The court order granted me full custody. Caleb's parental rights were suspended pending the criminal investigation. For the first time in over a year, I didn't have to fear who might show up at my door or what stories might be spread in whispers behind my back. I was still healing, still raw, but I could finally begin. We settled into my mother's modest ranch house on the edge of town. It was far from perfect: 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, peeling linoleum in the kitchen, but it was safe. And safety, I'd come to learn, was everything. I pulled Jamie into a new routine. School drop-offs. Grocery runs. Bedtime stories. Slowly, I reclaimed the little rituals that made me feel like a mother again. Some mornings I still woke up with panic tightening my chest, but it was easier now. Jamie's laughter had a way of breaking the fog. I started teaching again, but not in a classroom. I opened a small tutoring service out of the living room. Word spread quickly: Sandra Harris, back from the brink, helping kids catch up on math and reading. It was simple, but it mattered. I mattered. One afternoon, while Jamie napped on the couch, I opened my laptop and began to write. Not just in my journal this time, but publicly. I started a blog called The Quiet Return. I didn't name names. I didn't dwell on court records or police reports. Instead, I wrote about surviving. About feeling invisible in your own marriage. About the terrifying silence of depression. About how it feels to be doubted by the people you love most. Women began to message me. Strangers, mostly. Some had lived through similar betrayals. Others were just scared and didn't know who to talk to. They thanked me for speaking. For saying things they couldn't yet find the words for. And in replying, I found a purpose I hadn't expected. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about justice anymore. It was about making sure that no one else felt as alone as I had. Some days were harder than others. There were still legal updates, still flashbacks, still nights when I double-checked the locks on the doors. But I had people now. Real ones. My mom. A small but steady circle of support that held me upright when I felt like sinking. I didn't date. I wasn't interested. I needed time to remember who I was before I became someone's wife, someone's ghost, someone's victim. I needed to relearn the sound of my own voice. On Jamie's 6th birthday, he blew out candles shaped like dinosaurs and told me it was the best day of his life. I believed him. Because I felt it too. We had survived something monstrous. And we had done it together. I don't pretend everything is perfect now. Healing is not a straight line. It's a quiet, stubborn kind of work. But I know who I am again. I am a mother. A teacher. A writer. I am not what happened to me. I am what I chose to do after. I used to think surviving meant staying quiet. Enduring. Disappearing into the background and hoping the pain would forget me. But I know better now. I speak. I write. And I share my story, because someone out there is still waiting to hear that they're not alone. I used to be a victim. Now I'm a survivor. And I tell this story so that no one else has to live in silence the way I once did. Sandra survived betrayal, manipulation, and a crime staged to erase her. But in our next story, the stakes rise even higher. Marcus from Atlanta thought he could juggle 2 lives, his wife and his much younger mistress. But when jealousy turned deadly, his mistress set up the perfect crime, a murder scene that pointed to his wife. It almost worked. Until their 14-year-old son did the unthinkable to save his mother. Don't miss episode 2 of 10 True Affair Stories from Georgia. It's not just a story about cheating. It's about how far people will go to protect the ones they love, and destroy the ones they don't. Subscribe and turn on notifications. This next one will leave you breathless.